The day everything went sideways started like any other aboard the Zephyrian mining vessel Krinth's Claw. Well, if you consider being held prisoner by a race of 8-foot-tall, scaled monstrosities with anger management issues to be ordinary. But hey, when you're a lowly Vorthak maintenance drone scraping bio-waste from hull plates, your standards for normalcy tend to drop faster than a rock in a gravity well. My name is Grix, and I've been watching these so-called superior beings stumble around their own ship for 3 cycles now. The Zephyrians conquered my homeworld 6 months ago, dragging away anyone with useful skills. Lucky me got picked for the glamorous job of keeping their ship's intestines clean. Literally, these brutes eat something that produces waste with the consistency of liquid metal and the smell of rotting sulfur. But today was different. Today they brought aboard something that would make even a seasoned prisoner like me question the sanity of the universe. A human. Now, I'd heard stories about humans. Whispered tales in the lower decks about these strange, pink-skinned bipeds who supposedly could survive anything. Most of us figured it was just prison gossip, like the rumors about edible food in the officers' mess or functional heating in the worker quarters. Pure fantasy. The human female stood barely 5.5 feet tall, which made her a shrimp even by my species standards. Her hair was the color of aged copper wire, tied back in what I assumed was some sort of primitive knot. She wore torn fabric coverings that had seen better centuries, and her pale skin bore the telltale marks of recent interrogation. The Zephyrians weren't known for their gentle questioning techniques. The Sifrians weren't known for their gentle questioning techniques. Another meatbag for processing, sneered Korthak, the ship's third claw and resident sadist. His scales rippled with anticipation as he shoved the human into the detention bay where I was supposedly cleaning. Queen Vexara wants this one kept alive until the cubs finish their education. My cleaning implement nearly slipped from my grip. Queen Vexara's cubs were notorious throughout the ship. 3 juvenile Zephyrians, each roughly the size of a small transport, with all the temperament of a plasma storm, and twice the destructive capability. They'd been practicing their hunting skills on prisoners for weeks now, and the screaming had become part of the ship's background noise. The human woman, who I later learned was called Maya Taurus, looked around the detention bay with the sort of calm assessment that usually preceded either brilliant escape attempts or complete mental breakdowns. Given the circumstances, I was betting on the latter. Cozy, she muttered, examining the rust-stained walls and the delightful selection of torture implements hanging from hooks. Really brings out the homicidal maniac aesthetic you guys are going for. Wait, did she just crack a joke? While surrounded by instruments designed to extract information through creative applications of pain, either this human was completely insane, or there was something seriously wrong with her fear response. Korthak's head snapped toward her, his 4 eyes narrowing to predatory slits. You will learn respect, meat creature. The queen's cubs will teach you proper submission before they feast on your entrails. Maya tilted her head, studying him with the sort of interest usually reserved for mildly curious scientific specimens. Cubs, huh? Let me guess, mommy issues? They're acting out because they don't get enough attention? The silence that followed could have powered the ship's engines for a week. Nobody, and I mean nobody, mocked Queen Vexara's parenting skills. Not if they wanted to keep breathing. Korthak's hand moved to his plasma weapon with the fluid motion of someone who'd done this dance many times before. Perhaps the cubs will get their lesson early. Before he could draw, alarms started wailing throughout the ship. Emergency lights bathed everything in an ominous red glow, and the deck plates vibrated with the distinctive rhythm of approaching combat. Third claw to bridge, Korthak barked into his communication device. What's the situation? The response crackled with static and barely controlled panic. Human fleet vessels detected on long-range sensors. 3 ships, closing fast. Queen's orders are to prepare for battle and secure all prisoners. Korthak's scales shifted from their usual deep green to a mottled yellow, the Zephyrian equivalent of turning pale. Human fleet vessels weren't supposed to exist. According to official reports, humanity was nothing more than a primitive species confined to a single star system. They barely had interplanetary travel, let alone the technology for deep space warfare. Maya's expression shifted from casual interest to something that made my spine tentacles curl with unease. It was the look of someone who'd been waiting for this moment. Funny thing about humans, she said conversationally, as if discussing the weather instead of imminent combat, we're really bad at following other people's rules, especially the ones about staying put. The ship lurched violently as something impacted the hull. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut throughout the vessel, and the artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. I grabbed onto the nearest support beam, my suction cup appendages finding purchase just as another impact sent us all tumbling. Korthak activated his personal shield generator and headed for the door. "Remain here," he ordered, though whether he meant Maya or me wasn't clear. "The detention bay will hold until we've dealt with this misunderstanding." As soon as he left, Maya turned to me with a grin that would have made a Vorthak predator nervous. "Well, this should be interesting. Mind if I ask what species you are?" "Professional curiosity." "Professional curiosity?" We were locked in a prison cell aboard a ship under attack and she wanted to make small talk? "Vorthak," I managed, still trying to process the rapid-fire developments. "Maintenance technician, 3rd class, and you're completely insane, aren't you?" "Guilty as charged," she laughed, examining the lock mechanism on our cell door. "Though I prefer creatively unhinged, sounds more professional." The ship shook again, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear the distinctive roar of Zephyrian warriors preparing for boarding actions. These weren't warning shots or probing attacks. This was serious combat. "How?" I asked, unable to contain my curiosity. "How did humans find this ship? How did they even know you were here?" Maya's grin widened as she pulled something small and metallic from what looked like a seam in her clothing. "Remember those stories about human stubbornness? Well, there's another thing we're known for. We're absolutely terrible at leaving our people behind." The object in her hand was some sort of transmitter, small enough to hide but apparently sophisticated enough to broadcast across interstellar distances. She'd been carrying a tracking beacon all along. "You planned this," I said, the pieces falling into place. "You let them capture you." "Bingo," she said, working on the lock with practiced efficiency. "See, we've been tracking Zephyrian raids for months, following the patterns, mapping their routes. But we needed someone on the inside to confirm prisoner locations and gather intelligence about their ship designs." Another massive impact, and this time the lights flickered ominously. Emergency power kicked in, bathing us in the sickly amber glow of backup illumination. "So you volunteered to be bait," I said, torn between admiration and absolute horror at the plan's audacity. "Volunteered is such a formal word," Maya replied, still working on the lock. "I prefer to think of it as aggressive problem-solving." The lock mechanism clicked, and our cell door swung open with a satisfying creak. Maya stretched like someone who'd just finished a pleasant nap rather than escaped from an alien prison. "Now comes the fun part," she said, heading for the door. "We find the other prisoners and get everyone to the escape pods before this bucket of bolts turns into scrap metal." Fun part? I was beginning to understand why the rest of the galaxy found humans so disturbing. The corridor outside our cell was in complete pandemonium. Emergency lighting cast dancing shadows on the walls, and the constant background hum of the ship's systems had developed an unhealthy stutter. In the distance I could hear weapons fire and the distinctive sound of hull breaches being sealed. "Where would they keep the other prisoners?" Maya asked, moving with the confident stride of someone who owned the place. "Lower decks," I replied, trying to keep up. "Sections 7 through 12, but you'll never make it past the guard stations." She paused, giving me that unsettling grin again. "Grix, my friend, you're thinking like someone who follows rules." "I don't do rules." As if to emphasize her point, the ship lurched again, and we heard the unmistakable sound of something large and metallic being torn apart. Through the deck plating, I could feel the vibrations of running feet, dozens of them, all heading in the same direction. "Boarding parties," I said, my voice probably higher than intended. "The humans are already inside the ship." Maya nodded approvingly. "Right on schedule. My people don't mess around when it comes to rescue operations." We made it roughly 50 meters down the corridor before we encountered our first real obstacle. Not guards, not security systems, not even damaged bulkheads. 3 juvenile Zephyrians, each roughly the size of a ground transport and armed with enough natural weaponry to level a small building. Queen Vex-era's cubs apparently roaming free during the emergency. They spotted us immediately. Their massive heads swiveled in our direction with predatory focus, and their mouths opened to reveal rows of teeth that could punch through hull plating. These weren't just oversized house pets, these were killing machines that happened to be related to royalty. "Well," Maya said thoughtfully, apparently unbothered by the fact that we were facing down 3 creatures that could tear us apart without breaking a sweat. "This is unexpected." The largest cub, easily 12 feet tall and covered in scales that reflected the emergency lighting like polished armor, took a step forward. Its claws scraped against the deck plating with a sound like metal being shredded. "I don't suppose you have any experience with hostile juvenile aliens?" I whispered, trying not to make any sudden movements. "Define experience," Maya replied, then did something that nearly made my heart stop functioning. She walked toward them. Not away from the 3 apex predators who could reduce us to component molecules.
All dolls. Not to the side.
Looking for escape routes. Directly toward the cubs, her hands empty and her posture relaxed. "Easy there, big guys," she said in the same tone someone might use with nervous pets. "Nobody wants any trouble here." The cubs exchanged glances, clearly as confused by this development as I was. In their experience, prey ran away, screamed, begged for mercy, or tried to fight back. Prey did not calmly walk up and start a conversation. The largest cub let out a sound somewhere between a growl and a questioning rumble. Its siblings flanked it, forming a semicircle that blocked our path to the lower decks. Maya stopped just outside their reach, close enough that they could strike if they wanted to, but far enough away to avoid appearing threatening. It was either the bravest thing I'd ever seen or the most suicidally stupid. The cropper never had true Here's the thing, she continued, as if she were explaining something to particularly slow students. Your ship is currently being boarded by some very unhappy humans. Your mom is probably busy dealing with that whole situation, and you 3 are wandering around unsupervised in what's basically a war zone. The cubs tilted their heads in unison, a gesture that would have been adorable if they weren't capable of casual genocide. "So here's what I'm thinking," Maya said, pulling something from her pocket. It looked like a standard emergency ration bar, the kind every ship carried for crisis situations. "You guys are probably scared, maybe a little hungry, and definitely confused about why everything's going to pieces around you." She broke the ration bar into 3 pieces and held them out, one toward each cub. I was fairly certain I'd stopped breathing entirely. Feeding the Queen's offspring was either an act of unprecedented diplomacy or the prelude to the most unusual execution in galactic history. The smallest cub, probably only 10 feet tall and covered in lighter scales than its siblings, crept forward cautiously. Its massive nostrils flared as it caught the scent of the ration bar. "That's right," Maya said encouragingly. "Just a little snack. Nothing scary." The cub extended its neck, carefully taking the piece of ration bar from her hand with surprising gentleness. For a moment nothing happened. Then the cub's throat worked as it swallowed, and it made a soft rumbling sound that might have been contentment. The other 2 cubs immediately crowded forward, suddenly very interested in Maya's remaining ration pieces. "Typical teenagers," Maya muttered, distributing the food, always thinking with their stomachs. As the cubs munched their unexpected treats, Maya slowly began walking forward again.
Balls.
The massive predators simply moved aside, allowing her to pass. When I hesitated, the largest cub nudged me gently with its snout, apparently deciding I was part of whatever pack Maya represented. We'd made it perhaps another 100 meters when the real crisis began. The ship's intercom system crackled to life, and Queen Vex's voice echoed through the corridors with all the warmth of a collapsing star. "Attention all crew members. Whoop. My been boarded by human raiders. All prisoners are to be executed immediately to prevent intelligence gathering. The cubs are to be brought to the royal chambers for protection." Maya stopped walking. "Well, that's not good." Behind us, the 3 cubs suddenly went rigid, their heads snapping up as they processed their mother's words. The contentment vanished from their postures, replaced by something that looked suspiciously like fear. "The execution order includes us," I said unnecessarily. "Yeah, I picked up on that," Maya replied. "The question is, what are we going to do about it?" Before I could suggest several excellent options involving panic and running in circles, heavy footsteps echoed from the corridor ahead of us. A squad of Zephyrian warriors rounded the corner, weapons already drawn and shields activated. "There," barked their leader, pointing directly at us. "The escaped prisoners. Eliminate them immediately." The warriors raised their plasma rifles, energy already building in the charging chambers. In approximately 5 seconds, Maya and I were going to become very small piles of superheated particles. That's when something extraordinary happened. The 3 cubs moved faster than anything that size had any right to move. They flowed around Maya like living water, positioning themselves between her and the weapons. The largest cub opened its mouth and let out a sound that made the ship's hull plates vibrate. It wasn't a roar. It wasn't a growl. It was a challenge, directed at full-grown warriors who'd spent their entire lives learning to kill. The warriors froze, their weapons still raised but no longer aimed at us. Shooting through the Queen's offspring to eliminate prisoners was the sort of career move that typically ended with public execution. "Stand down, cubs," the squad leader ordered, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Return to your mother immediately. We have orders to eliminate these prisoners." The largest cub took a step forward, placing itself even more firmly between the warriors and Maya. Its siblings closed ranks, creating an impenetrable wall of scales and teeth. Maya, standing safely behind 12 tons of juvenile alien muscle, looked remarkably calm for someone whose life expectancy had just been extended by the whims of creatures that could eat her for breakfast. "Well," she said conversationally, "this is new." The standoff lasted exactly 4 seconds before everything went completely sideways. Again, the ship's artificial gravity cut out without warning, sending warriors, cubs, and prisoners floating in a tangle of confused limbs and weapons. Emergency thrusters fired randomly as the vessel's automated systems tried to compensate for whatever the human boarding parties had done to the main power grid. "Gravity failure," I announced, because sometimes stating the obvious helps when your world is literally turning upside down. Maya, somehow managing to look graceful even while floating sideways near the ceiling, grabbed onto the largest cub's horn and used it to orient herself. "Thanks for the update, Grix. Really helpful." The Zephyrian warriors were having considerably more trouble adapting to zero gravity. Their heavy armor and weapons designed for ground-based combat turned them into flailing metal piñatas. One of them accidentally discharged his plasma rifle into the ceiling, creating a shower of sparks that drifted around us like deadly confetti. "Amateur hour," Maya muttered, watching the display with professional disapproval. "Never seen anyone handle microgravity this badly since my nephew's first spacewalk." The cubs, meanwhile, seemed to find the whole experience delightful. They moved through the weightless environment with surprising grace, using their claws to push off walls and surfaces. The smallest one actually appeared to be playing some sort of 3-dimensional tag with floating debris. "Attention all units," Queen Vexera's voice boomed through the intercom again, sounding considerably less regal and more panicked than before. "Human forces have breached the engine room. All available warriors report to Deck 5 immediately. Execute the prisoners and bring me my cubs now." The squad leader, still spinning slowly near the far wall, tried to aim his weapon at Maya. This proved challenging when both he and his target were rotating in different directions at roughly the same speed. "This is taking forever," Maya said, sounding genuinely annoyed. "Ho, big guy," she called to the largest cub. "Think you could help move this along?" The cub turned its massive head toward her, and I swear I saw something that looked like understanding pass between them. Then it opened its mouth and roared. Not the territorial challenge from before. All this was the full-throated battle cry of an apex predator announcing its intention to remove obstacles from its path. The sound was so intense that my hearing organs temporarily shut down to prevent damage. The warriors stopped trying to shoot us and started trying to figure out how to retreat while floating helplessly in zero gravity. Professional military training apparently didn't cover scenarios involving royal offspring having temper tantrums in microgravity. "Retreat," the squad leader ordered, though his authority was somewhat undermined by the fact that he was currently drifting toward a wall head first.
"Fall back to Deck 3 and await reinforcements."
As the warriors attempted their graceless exit, Maya used the distraction to work her way along the wall toward a maintenance panel. Her movements were fluid and purposeful, someone clearly comfortable in zero-G environments. "What are you doing?" I asked, managing to grab a handheld and stop my own rotation. "Checking the ship schematics," she replied, her fingers dancing over the control interface with practiced efficiency. "If I'm right about the design, there should be a cargo bay on Deck 4 with emergency escape pods. You can read Zephyrian technical displays." "I can read any technical display," Maya said, with casual confidence. "Universal constants, basic physics, and the fact that all spacefaring species tend to put their escape pods near the cargo bays for easy access." The ship lurched violently as something exploded in the distance. Through the walls we could hear the distinctive whine of human plasma weapons and the answering roar of Zephyrian battle cries. "Your people are winning," I observed. "My people are professionals," Maya corrected. "There's a difference." Gravity suddenly returned with a vengeance, dropping all of us to the deck in a heap of tangled limbs and bruised pride. The cubs handled the transition better than anyone else, landing on their feet with feline grace, despite weighing several tons each. Maya rolled to her feet and dusted herself off. "Backup power grid is online. That means we've got maybe 10 minutes before they get the main systems back up and seal off this section." 10 minutes for what? "To get everyone off this ship before it becomes a very expensive piece of space debris." The way she said it suggested she had specific knowledge about the ship's immediate future. Given the day's track record, I decided not to ask for details. We made our way through increasingly damaged corridors, the cubs trailing behind us like the world's most dangerous escort service. Emergency lights flickered sporadically, and the air recycling systems wheezed with mechanical distress. "Question," I said as we navigated around a section where something had punched a hole completely through 3 bulkheads. "Why are the cubs following us instead of going to their mother?" Maya glanced back at our unlikely companions, who were currently investigating the hole with scientific curiosity. "Good question. Maybe they're smarter than everyone gives them credit for." We reached the prisoner detention levels, just as another explosion rocked the ship. This one was close enough to knock us off our feet and send a rain of ceiling tiles cascading down around us. "Structural integrity is failing," I announced, because apparently I'd appointed myself the ship's unofficial narrator of obvious problems. "Yeah, I noticed," Maya said dryly, helping me back to my feet. "The humans probably planted charges throughout the ship. Standard operating procedure for rescue missions where the target vessel might try to run. They're going to destroy the entire ship, only if they have to. But yeah, that's Plan B. Plan B. As if deliberately destroying a massive military vessel was just a minor backup option. Humans were definitely as crazy as the stories suggested. The detention block was in complete shambles. Cell doors hung open, their locking mechanisms fried by power surges. Bodies of guards lay scattered in the corridors, victims of what looked like systematic and highly professional execution. "Your people have been busy," I said. "Rescue Team Alpha doesn't mess around," Maya replied with obvious pride. "Best boarding specialists in the fleet." We found the surviving prisoners huddled in the main holding area, a mixed group of perhaps 30 beings from a dozen different species. They looked up as we approached, their expressions shifting from hope to confusion as they noticed our escort. "Maya Torres, Human Colonial Fleet," Maya announced, apparently seeing no need to explain the 3 juvenile predators standing behind her. "We're leaving, right now. Anyone who wants to stay and discuss philosophy with Queen Vexera is welcome to remain aboard." A Keldan engineer with 3 arms raised one of them hesitantly.
Are those the Queen's cubs?"
"Yep," Maya said cheerfully. "They've decided we're their new pack. Long story. We'll sort out the details later." "They'll kill us all," whispered a Thurian traitor, his blue skin pale with terror. The largest cub, apparently sensing the fear, made a soft rumbling sound and lowered its massive head to the traitor's eye level. Instead of the expected dismemberment, the creature simply looked at him, not with predatory hunger but with what could only be described as curiosity. The traitor stopped shaking. "Right then," Maya said, clapping her hands together. "Everyone who wants to live through the next hour, follow me. Everyone else, it's been nice knowing you." The march to the escape pods was like something out of a fever dream. 30-odd prisoners being herded through a dying ship by a human woman, and 3 juvenile aliens who should have been eating them instead of protecting them. We encountered 2 more warrior patrols on the way to the cargo bay. Both times the cubs positioned themselves between the prisoners and the weapons, their body language making it clear that anyone wanting to reach us would have to go through them first. Both times the warriors decided they had more important things to do elsewhere. "This is insane," muttered a Vorthak female walking beside me. "Predators don't protect prey, it violates every natural law." "Maybe," I replied, watching Maya scratch behind the smallest cub's ear ridge as they walked. "Or maybe we don't understand predators as well as we think we do." The cargo bay doors were sealed when we arrived, but Maya produced another one of her mysterious tools, and went to work on the locking mechanism. Behind us, the cubs had arranged themselves in a defensive semicircle, apparently having appointed themselves as our official bodyguards. "How many escape pods?" asked the Keldan engineer. 4, Maya replied without looking up from the lock. Standard cargo configuration. Each one holds 10 passengers, so we'll be a bit crowded, but everyone should fit. What about them? The engineer nodded toward the cubs. Maya paused in her work and looked back at the 3 massive creatures. For a moment, her confident expression faltered, replaced by something that might have been genuine concern. That, she said quietly, is a very good question. The lock clicked open, and the cargo bay doors slid apart with a pneumatic hiss. Inside, 4 sleek escape pods waited in their launch cradles, their status lights showing green across the board. Everyone in, Maya ordered. Groups of 10 mixed species for weight distribution. Move quickly and quietly. As the prisoners filed into the pods, Maya knelt beside the largest cub and placed her hand on its snout. The creature lowered its massive head until they were eye to eye. Listen to me, she said softly. I know you don't understand all of this, but your mother wants to hurt us. The people in these pods, they're not enemies. They're just trying to go home. The cub made a low rumbling sound, almost like a question. I have to go with them, Maya continued, to keep them safe. But you need to find somewhere secure until this is over, somewhere your mother can protect you. The other 2 cubs had moved closer, sensing the importance of the moment. All 3 of them watched Maya with an intensity that was both touching and terrifying. Maya, I called from the entrance to pod 3. We need to go now. She nodded but didn't move away from the cubs. I'm sorry, she said to them. I wish things were different. The smallest cub suddenly darted forward, pressing its head against Maya's shoulder in what was unmistakably an affectionate gesture. The other 2 followed suit, creating a huddle that completely hid the human woman from view. When they finally pulled back, all 3 cubs were making soft whimpering sounds, not the vocalizations of apex predators, but the cries of confused children who didn't understand why their protector was leaving. Maya's eyes were suspiciously bright as she backed toward the escape pod. Take care of each other, she said. And remember, not everyone who looks different is an enemy. The cubs watched her go, their massive forms somehow managing to look small and vulnerable despite their size. I was halfway into pod 3 when the cargo bay's main doors exploded inward. Queen Vexera herself strode through the wreckage, flanked by her personal guard and radiating enough fury to power a small star. She was magnificent and terrifying, in equal measure. Easily 15 feet tall, covered in scales that shifted color with her emotional state, currently a deep crimson, that spoke of barely contained rage. Her 4 arms each held a different weapon, and her eyes blazed with the cold fire of absolute authority. My cubs, she snarled, her voice carrying the sort of menace usually reserved for geological disasters, and the meat that corrupted them. The cubs turned toward their mother, but instead of running to her as expected, they moved to block her path to the escape pods. The largest one planted itself directly in front of pod 4, where Maya was making final preparations for launch. Move, Queen Vexara commanded. Now. The cubs didn't budge. For a moment that stretched into eternity, mother and children faced each other across the cargo bay. The queen's scales shifted from crimson to deep purple, the Zephyrian equivalent of shock. You would defy me? She whispered. For them? The largest cub took a step forward and made a complex series of sounds. Not words exactly, but clearly communication. The queen's head tilted as she listened, her expression shifting from rage to confusion to something that might have been understanding. When the cub finished speaking, Queen Vexera was silent for nearly 30 seconds. Then slowly her scales began to shift from purple to a mottled green gold. Impossible, she said softly. What did it say? I whispered to Maya.
I have no idea,
She replied. But I don't think we're being executed anymore. Queen Vexara stepped closer to her cubs, her weapons lowering slightly. She extended one massive hand toward the smallest cub, who immediately pressed against it with obvious affection. They say, the queen said slowly, her voice carrying a note of wonder, that you showed them kindness when they were afraid.
Yay.
That you fed them when they were hungry. That you protected them when they were confused. Maya nodded carefully. They're children. Children shouldn't have to be afraid. They are predators. They are born to kill. They're both, Maya said firmly.
Just like you.
Just like all of us. Being dangerous doesn't mean you can't also be kind.
Chirin.
Saris. The Maeve said Regas. The queen stared at her for a long moment, then turned to look at the escape pods full of prisoners. You came here to steal my subjects. I came here to take home people who were stolen from their families, Maya corrected. People who have children of their own waiting for them. Another silence, broken only by the distant sounds of ongoing combat elsewhere in the ship. The ship is dying, Queen Vexera said finally.
Yes.
Maya agreed. My people are very thorough. And you would take my cubs with you, as prisoners? Maya looked at the three massive creatures who were watching the conversation with obvious intelligence. I would take them somewhere safe, somewhere they could learn that strength doesn't have to mean cruelty, that being powerful doesn't require hurting others. The Queen's scale shifted again, this time to a pattern I didn't recognize. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I have ruled through fear for 40 cycles. My cubs were to inherit that legacy, to become the terror that keeps 100 worlds in line. She paused, looking at her children, with an expression I couldn't interpret. But they chose kindness over conquest. They chose protection over predation. They chose better. The ship shuddered as another explosion rocked the hull. Emergency alarms began wailing with increasing urgency. 30 seconds to structural collapse, Maya announced, apparently reading data from her portable device. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it now. Queen Vexera made a sound that might have been laughter or crying. Then she knelt down and gathered all three cubs in her massive arms. Go, she said to Maya. Take them. Teach them the thing I could not. Come with us, Maya said impulsively. There's room. We can make room. The Queen shook her massive head. A captain dies with her ship, and a queen faces the consequences of her choices. The cubs began making distressed sounds as they realized what was happening. They tried to move toward both their mother and Maya simultaneously, torn between instinct and affection. Go, Queen Vexera roared, and this time it was a command that brooked no argument. The escape pods launched in sequence, carrying 33 former prisoners and 3 very confused juvenile aliens away from the dying ship. Through the tiny viewport, I watched Krent's claw break apart in a series of brilliant explosions, its hull finally succumbing to the damage inflicted by the human rescue fleet. In the last moments before the ship's destruction, I thought I saw a massive figure standing in the cargo bay, silhouetted against the flames. Han Vexera, facing her end with the dignity befitting royalty. Maya sat across from me, in the cramped pod, one hand resting on the smallest cub's head as it whimpered softly. The other 2 cubs pressed close to their sibling, forming a protective huddle in the limited space. So what happens now? I asked. Maya was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the stars. Now we go home, she said finally. All of us, and we figure out how to build something better than what we had before. The cubs settled down for the long journey, apparently deciding that whatever came next, they would face it together. And as I watched the human woman who had turned an execution into a rescue, who had transformed predators into protectors, I began to think that maybe, just maybe, the galaxy was about to become a much more interesting place. After all, if there's one thing humans are really good at, it's making the impossible look routine. Even when it involves adopting 3 tons of apex predator and calling it a family.